Hey guys, so we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to social psychology, aggression, altruism, and everything in between. That's kind of a large spectrum. So let's start with aggression, the bad. What aggression is any physical or verbal behavior intended to hurt or destroy. It doesn't have to hurt or destroy. It has to just have the intention. So, when we say like be aggressive, that's the intention to hurt or destroy, whether it be physical aggression, verbal aggression, anything that the intention is to, destroy the other, that is an act of aggression. In class, we're going to do a little activity where we try to rank things, whether they're aggressive or not aggressive. So let's talk about the biology of aggression. What's actually going on? There's genetic influences for sure. If your parents are aggressive people, you're more likely to be aggressive just because of genetics that come into play, not because you grew up in their household. That would not be biology. That would be, nurture as opposed to nature. Dogs are bred to be aggressive. There are dogs that are bred to fight each other. As awful as that is, that's why pit bulls and those types of dogs are known to be aggressive because they have been bred to be. There's also neural influences. There are parts of our brain we're going to talk about later, one of them being the amygdala. That is a part that deals with aggression and animalistic emotions. And there was a study. This wasn't an experiment because they were not manipulating anything. This is a case study where some neuroscientists went to a prison with 10 death row inmates, and they did brain scans of all 10 death row inmates, and every single one of them, they were there on death row for violent crimes. Every single one of them had some sort of either lesion, which means like cut or damage to their amygdala, their parts of the brain that dealt with aggression. And so, that's 10 out of 10. That's a pretty extraordinary number. Biochemical influences as well, whether it be alcohol. It's something like 7 out of 10 domestic abuse. When cops are called, alcohol is present. There's also biochemical, could be your neurotransmitters or your hormones like testosterone. The animal with the highest level of testosterone in the world is a bull shark, and a bull shark is very aggressive. They will bite anything. People are always afraid of great white sharks. It's bull sharks that are scary because they will bite anything, a tire, a leg, a surfboard, whatever. So let's talk about the psychology of aggression. I like this, the frustration aggression principle. This is the aggression that you get and the frustration that you get when things do not pan out the way that you thought. If anyone's seen the movie Office Space, there is a fantastic scene where there's this copy machine and then this office building that is giving them problems. It won't print. You have to keep loading the PC letter or something. And eventually, towards the end of the movie, they take the copy machine out and to a field. And as gangster rap is playing in the background, they beat the crap out of the copy machine with a bat, their feet, and their bare hands at one point. And so the frustration aggressive principle, if you've ever experienced putting money into a vending machine, typing in the number, typing in the code, and then the little spiral turns and the things just fall a little bit but do not actually fall down, and you want to rock back and forth the vending machine, that right there, you have just experienced the frustration aggression principle. Okay. Also, there are counts of higher aggression with in homes where there is limited or minimal father care, because you learning to express and inhibit, so expressing in the appropriate way and then inhibiting it when it's not appropriate, that comes from that comes from parents. You have to learn that. And there is a correlation, not necessarily a causation, because you can't run an experiment taking a father out and seeing what happens. This is just a correlation between minimal father care and higher rates of aggression. Oh, going back to this little picture at the bottom here, murders and rapes per day in Houston, Texas. This was in our textbook a while back, that actually murder rates in Houston and rapes in Houston go up when temperature goes up, because people are so frustrated. And their fuse, it's much shorter when it's 110 degrees outside. When you get in your car and you feel like your head's going to explode because it's 120, 130 degrees in your car, people's fuses get a little bit shorter when it's hot outside. So there is some sort of psychology and correlation between the temperature and people's acts of aggression. It's hard to be aggressive when it's freezing outside. It requires too much energy. Okay, so where do you learn aggression? There are studies, and I know how controversial this is, there are studies between watching TV and acts of aggression. The average child watches 8,000 TV murders and 100,000 other acts of violence before finishing elementary school. And this is quite a range when it comes to murders and acts of violence. We're talking about Bugs Bunny getting smashed by an anvil, and video games where it's like you stomp on like a character and it dies. So I mean, I don't know if you want to call that active aggression or murders, but when the intent is to harm and destroy the other side in the video game, then yes, that goes along with the definitions of aggression. And in US and Canada, homicide rates doubled between 1957 and 1974, coinciding with the introduction and the spread of television. So once again, it's a correlation or causation. But the big experiment that everyone always mentions is Bandura's Bobo doll. This is Albert Bandura, and he did an experiment that we're going to look at tomorrow between the seeing aggression and the doing of aggression. The monkey see, monkey do. Let's talk about sexual aggression. There is this myth, it's called the rape myth. And as awful as this is, there is a myth, an idea that women actually would enjoy being raped. That it's not necessarily like out there where people are like, oh yeah, people totally think that women enjoy this, but it's almost implied. There have been plenty of movies, Oscar-winning movies, where the man and the woman have had sexual tension, for 90 minutes in the movie, and at the end of the movie, has some sort of conflict because there's a lack of communication and whatever. And then finally, it blows up to where they're like wrestling each other, like she's like, get away. And then he finally kisses her and she gives in and she just melts away and they start kissing. And then all of a sudden they're in love. And she just actually, she really just wanted him to kiss her like that. Well, that's sexual assault. You can't, if a woman is saying no, even if she's showed interest before, if a woman says no, that is rape, and that's where it should have ended. But there's been a lot of movies where it seems to imply that, oh well, she's just acting hard to get, and if you just try harder, I mean that's what she really wants. So this whole playing it cool and acting hard to get kind of feeds into this rape myth. And if you see on this little pie chart here that the perpetrator's relationship to the victim is not necessarily, guy creepy in the bushes that, you're jogging and he jumps out and there's a rape. Typically, it's either a friend, an acquaintance, a relative, someone that they've dated before or that are currently dating. Unfortunately, it's not as random as just someone in the bushes, which makes it that much more scary, since more people are raped by someone that they know as opposed to a stranger. This is a scary infographic. Hopefully you can read it. Okay. So we talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. That was the bad, if not the ugly. Here's still not great, but we're not into altruism and love just yet, which is conflict. Conflict is a perceived incompatibility of actions, goals, or ideas. So there's something that's just not compatible between people's actions, goals, or ideas. We're going to watch this clip in a little bit in class, but I want you to remind me in class to go over social traps and Adam Smith. Okay, now let's talk about the good side of relationships. Attraction. First off, attraction. I'm not talking about like sexual attraction. I'm just talking about any type of attraction. It can lead to sexual attraction, but why your friends pick you and why you pick your friends. So the 3 ingredients of our liking each other. One is proximity. The closer geographically they are to you, the more likely you are to like them. And there goes the mere exposure effect. Mere exposure effect is just by seeing something over and over and over and over again, increases your likeliness of liking it. That's why if people see a picture of themselves versus how can I say this? The version you see of yourself is opposite of the version of everyone else sees of you. You look in a mirror when you see yourself. You are seeing the flipped side of your face. Everyone else is seeing it the other way. You think you part your hair to one side, but really everyone else sees it as the other side. So if you are seeing 2 pictures of yourself, one is the mirror image of you, and the other one is the image that everyone else sees, you're more likely to think of yourself as more beautiful or prettier if you see the mirror image version of yourself. Why? Because that's the image you see yourself every day. The other one looks odd to you, even though that's the one everyone else sees every single day. Physical attractiveness. Unfortunately, people judge people immediately, and it's based on the way that they look. You cannot help it. There's something wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's something that we're like programmed to do, is make a snap judgment very, very quickly about someone based on how they look. And physical attractiveness, and of course that varies from culture to culture and from person to person, is one reason that we are attracted to people. Our friends. We tend to be friends with people that we see, if we found them grotesquely ugly, we're probably not going to be friends with them, just because they're so, hard to look at. Same thing with sexual attraction. I mean, you're going to more likely talk to someone that you find physically attractive. Of course, that varies. And similarity, birds of a feather flock together. You're more likely to be attracted to someone who has a lot of things in common with you than opposites. And I know that people say that opposites attract. Opposites attract the very beginning of relationships, but it's hard to have a relationship with someone that you have nothing in common with. And we need to talk about the big things that you have in common. Attitudes that you believe that makes up your personality, the big attitudes to have, whether that the belief in this or the feeling towards this. I mean, it's probably hard to have someone who is like an avid hunter and then a vegan. Probably not going to get married. Just saying, probably not going to get married. And if they do, not married for very long. Because what are they going to eat? And so we have these to show that, beauty and cultures vary, but are they really all that different? We tend to oh, that's so gross. But then the other culture might look at ours as just as gross. And let's talk about love. And there's 2 types of love. 2 types of romantic love. We're not talking about oh, I love my siblings or I love my parents. No, the romantic, passionate love. Okay, and there's passionate and companionate. So here on the left, we have passionate love. This love fades. This love is not the forever love. This love fades between 6 and 30 months. And I want you to think about that. That's the first 3 years of a relationship. You're in the passionate love at the very most 3 years. which means if you're, dating someone and then engaged to someone and married to someone, it's very possible that you've done all those steps, dating, engaged, and marriage, in the first 3 years, and you've only known the passionate love, and that love is going to fade. Hopefully, with what you have left over is the companionate love. And that's what we have here on the bottom. The companionate love, that is where there's equity. It's 50-50. It may not be 50-50 every day. It may not be 50-50 every month. But over the course of your relationship, it is 50-50. And there's self-disclosure, where secrets are shared. Intimacy is shared. And not just sexual intimacy, but like trust, and companionship. It's not just like the gotta have you right here, right now type of love that you see in passionate love, but it's the companionate love. The sitting quietly at dinner and then holding your hand in a movie type of love. And hopefully that love is here to stay. And it is. It doesn't fade. So, did you know that non-Western cultures have a lower divorce rates, but they also rank love as less important for a marriage, which kind of goes against our crazy Western ideas of like love is all you need. Maybe for a marriage, love isn't high up there. Maybe there's other things besides that. Okay, I want you to look at these because in class we're going to rank these in order of importance, and they're going to see how they are compared to what women and men think. So, we just said the bad and the ugly. Let's talk about the great. Altruism. Altruism is an unselfish regard for the welfare of others. This is the doing something good because it has to be done, for no reason. Not because, I volunteer. Oh, so you can put that on your college resume? Or, oh, I donate to Goodwill. Oh, so you can get a tax write-off? No, it is the unselfish. It is doing something for nothing that you get in return, something good. There's an example of Phoebe in Friends where she's trying to find an unselfish good deed. That's called altruism. And she fails several times throughout the episode. She's like, oh, I let a bee sting me in the park so the bee could look tough in front of his other bee friends. Of course, she finds out later that bees die after they sting, so then she gets all upset about that. And then she eventually donates to PBS for Joey, but she hates PBS, so she's doing an unselfish good deed, but then that makes Joey happy, which makes her happy. So basically, at the end of the episode, they realize that there's not too many cases of altruism, but there are some. Like if a live grenade enters a group's camp, and a soldier dives over that grenade at the cost of his own life to save the rest, that would be a valid example of altruism because he can't get anything in return. He's not thinking as he's diving over, or she, not diving over the grenade like there's going to be a monument erected in my honor. Like they're not thinking that. That's completely altruistic. It is unselfish. There was an American Airlines flight 1420 that crashed and takeoff. I think it ran off the airstrip and crashed into a pole. And this teenager, I think he was 19, he stayed on board and he got 30 people to safety. And then he went back in because he thought there was one more person left in the plane. The plane was actually empty, but he couldn't tell from the smoke, and he did die. He stayed back and he helped people escape at the cost of his own life. That is an altruistic act. Okay, so why do we help? Because why would we do something at the cost of our own life when we get nothing in return? Why do we help to begin with? So it's amazing that we do help when we do help. It is amazing because there's this little algorithm that we kind of go through, and you can kind of see it. I'm trying to think of what the camera is going to be. Here. It's this over here. It's this little arrows thing. Or is it over here? Maybe it's over here. Do we even notice the incident? If we don't, we're not going to help. If we do we see it as an emergency? If we don't, we're not going to help. If we see it as an emergency, do we assume responsibility? If we don't, then we're not going to help. There's so many reasons not reasons. There's so many times that we get out of helping that it's amazing that we actually do help. And a really sad thing is something called the bystander effect. The more people that witness an emergency, the less likely they are to help. It's this idea of diffusion of responsibility. They do not help because they think, well, look at all the people helping. We're not going to help because someone else is going to do it. How many times have you driven past a car accident and you assume that the ambulance is on their way? You assume that they've called the tow truck. You assume that they have a phone. You assume, well, look at all these other cars that are driving by, no one's stopping. Someone falls down in the hallway. Are you rushing over to help them pick them up, or do you just walk right past them because you assume that either one of their friends is going to help them, or they've got it, they're almost done? Do you assume responsibility? Because the more people that are there, the more likely you will not help. We're going to talk about Kitty Genovese in class, and talk about how this bystander effect can really go wrong. So why do we help? We get all these chances to get out of help. So why do we do help? We must be anticipating that the rewards outweigh the cost. Is the benefit of helping outweigh the benefit of not helping? Because it just depends. Is it really worth it to help? Either reciprocity is, I feel like someone is going to, well, I'll help because, they'll help me in the future. Like, I'm going to help someone move out of their apartment because, when it's time for me to move, I'm going to call them. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. That's the reciprocity norm. Or is it just social responsibility? You feel like I have to take the responsibility, otherwise no one else will. So there's, two reasons why we help. Reciprocity, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. What comes around goes around, good karma maybe. Or just social responsibility is that you just take it upon yourself that if I don't do it, it's not going to get done, so it's got to get done, and I'll do it. These are all just examples of how to reduce conflict when there is one. I think of remember the Titans. There's racial conflict between, the same team, and, they have to cooperate, get them to cooperate in something, get them to communicate, and then something called grit, which is graduated and I can never say this word. Reciprocated. Wow, there it is. Reciprocated incentives and tension reducing. Basically, it's put-ups. Instead of a put down, you give them a put up. Say one nice thing that you like about them, and eventually that will make conflict start to ease and get a little bit better. And then culture. Culture was in a different chapter, but why would we not talk about culture when we talk about social psychology? So when it talks about culture, what a culture is the behavior, ideals, attitudes, and traditions shared by a large group of people and transmitted from one generation to the next. That's culture. And culture variations and similarities. There's things a lot that are very similar in a culture and things that are very different between cultures, like the norms. The typical norm in the American household is that you move out when you're 18, and then you do not live with your parents again. You move out of the house. In different cultures, they stay in the same house, like a family house, for generations. 3 or 4 generations might live in the same house. You don't move out of your parents' house, or they might move in with you. And so that's different from culture to culture. Personal space is very, very different. Americans probably have the largest personal space. Think about the bubble of comfort that you like around you. If someone's standing next to you in line, how close do they get to you before you feel uncomfortable? For Americans in general, our bubble's pretty big. If people get in our bubble, we tend to back out of it. But in different cultures, they prefer close space. They prefer, if they're talking to you, different cultures, they might get really, really close up to you, and you might start backing away because it's making you feel uncomfortable, all of this personal space. And that could lead to miscommunication and could lead to someone getting offended pretty easily if their personal space is either violated or is if you keep retreating from them. Expressiveness, different cultures are expressive in different ways. Whether they like to, mourn quietly after a death, or they like to mourn publicly, if they are loud or quiet people, just different cultures. And pace of life. Like Americans, pretty fast pace of life. I mean, we eat meals in our car as we're driving. Different cultures, I mean, they take 2-3 hour siestas of time to go home and take a nap. And, it's a completely different pace of life in different cultures. And child rearing. Do you respect your elders, or do you start to question your elders? I mean, that can change in a culture within a certain generations. I mean, just, maybe your grandparents ago, very, very respecting of their elders. But this generation, future generations, maybe they're more questioning. Maybe they're more, stick up for yourself and, don't talk back or do talk back or whatever. Okay. And that is the end of social psychology as of yet.